Just introducing myself, I'm Andrea Perry and I'm the chair of the Community Action Team. We've called the Hustings tonight to give local people a chance to host candidates in the directly elected race for Croydon. So I just wanted to kind of just give a little bit of information about how this came about. So people will probably be aware that in October last year, Croydon residents voted to change the governance model. There was a referendum. Although it was quite a low turnout, maybe 21%, it was overwhelming in favour of the directly elected mayor model. So these are the candidates. We are just missing Peter Underwood, who's a Green candidate who is just running a bit late, stuck on the train. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just introduce each candidate, and then we're going to give them a maximum of 5 minutes to explain a bit about themselves, some of their vision, I'm sure their policies, what they plan to do for our borough going forward. So if I just introduce going forward, so here we have, in the end, we have Val Shawcross, who's the Labour candidate, and next to her is Farah from the Taking the Initiative Party. We have Jason Perry, who's a Conservative candidate. Then we have Gavin, who's an independent. Shortly we will have Peter Underwood, who's Green, and then from the end, Rick Howard, who's a Liberal Democrat candidate. So what I'm going to do is ask for a volunteer from our panel to start off giving us a bit of information about themselves. Have a volunteer? You have to go? Sorry? Yeah, sure. You want to go? Right, okay, there we go.
So my name is Gavin Palmer. I'm a 2-1 mechanical engineer from Exeter University. I went there age 17. I've solved major problems in terms of bicycle safety. I've created the largest nightclub at Exeter University. I was elected on the student union. I shifted exams by a week. I also was in the university first sailing team. I've also solved some other fairly large problems. I'm an independent director. I'm standing as an independent because I think this is the only way that we can actually fix and solve the broken two-party system that we've got in Croydon. And I am also very much Croydon. My family have been here for 120 years, and my grandfather worked with Smith & Sons Norwood and built most of Norbury, Norwood, Woodside, and a very attractive estate around Wadden Ponds. So I'm almost 50 years old, and I had enough, and that's me.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. Short and sweet. So who's next? Remember you have 5 minutes. 5 minutes.
I am born from Croydon, from South Norwood, and I'm a global international entrepreneur. I've travelled all over the world doing business with governments and driving policies globally and also in the UK. Now, I stand here for you because, like Gavin just said, the two-party system is just not working anymore. We are all fed up and we all want change. We all deserve change. Croydon needs change. It's not acceptable what has been allowed to happen to Croydon. We need a council that represents the people, not dictates to the people. And that's why I'm here today, because this is personal. Being born here means something more to me than you can understand. My father moved here 73 years ago, he's now 92. And just seeing how it's deteriorated, it's not acceptable. And I want to bring that change. I want to drive forward, make it a thriving economy for all of us, that we have opportunities and we can be proud. Not be in the top 20 of the worst places in the UK, but be in the top 10 of the best places to live. That's what we deserve. So I'm going to give the opportunity to everyone else to talk and please ask any questions that you have. And thank you for having me.
So, next volunteer. Next volunteer. Shall we go? Okay. Just try and not put the microphone too close to your phone. Thanks, yeah.
Yeah, I'm only being talking to the microphone due to the voice there. So, my name's Richard Howard. I'm the Liberal Democrat candidate for Mayor. Just to give you a little bit about myself, I moved to Croydon 8 years ago when I left the army. So I retired as a major in the British Army. I served for just under 20 years there. The main part of my service was in explosive ordnance disposal. So this was counter-improvised explosive device disposal all across the world in Iraq, Northern Ireland, Afghanistan. When I left the army, I went into the finance industry and I worked for a number of large banks. I now run my own business, helping people, charities, other organisations and corporate entities in order to plan their finances and achieve their goals and achieve financial security. And I'm standing to be Mayor of Croydon because I think that's exactly what Croydon needs. It needs somebody to get a grip of its finances, to get a grip of what's been happening here. There has been a legacy of mismanagement when it comes to Croydon for decades. It's not just spanning back over the last couple of years. It's there, and it's because the system, I believe, is far too adversarial. It is one side always attacking the other. There's no collaboration, there's no cooperation, there's nobody working together to do the best for Croydon. And that's what I would aim to achieve here. I've got a number of priorities. I'm a candidate who wants to be mayor so I can hand power back to you, to hand back power to local communities. Because I think Croydon is too centralised. Catherine Street and Burnham Weather House is not that far away, but it can feel a million miles away to communities like this here in Thornton Heath. So I want to devolve the decision making into town and parish councils. I want to make neighbourhood forums. I want people to have a real say in what happens in their local community. And I also want them to have some of the funding that comes with it. So where there is developments that come with infrastructure levy, to give that funding to local communities to spend in the ways that they want. There's going to be lots of people today talking about what they think is best for Thornton Heath. I think the people who know what's best for Thornton Heath are sitting on this side, not on this side here. And what I want to do is empower local communities like this to do the best for their communities and to bring Croydon forward. So that's what I'm pass on to the next person.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. Just welcome you, Peter, as well. So it's Peter Underwood, the Green candidate. We just explained that you were caught on the train, so.
Yes.
Right, so our next one here. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. My name is Jason Perry and I'm the Conservative candidate for Mayor of Croydon. I'm a Croydonian, born and bred. Spent much of my youth up in Underwood Library, far too much time up in Underwood Library actually. Learned to swim in Thornton Heath swimming pools, the very old Victorian ones with the changing rooms down the side. And I've lived my life in Croydon, state educated in Croydon, and I've enjoyed living here, and I'm proud to say that I'm a Croydonian. I think the problem is we're at a point now where the odds have never been higher for Croydon, the stakes have never been higher. We know the backdrop of this election. We know that Labour have bankrupted the council. We know that borrowing has been doubled. We know that money has been borrowed to buy shopping centres, to buy hotels. And money has been wasted on Fairfield Halls, where unlawful activity has taken place. And the time has come where we need to change that narrative. That bad behaviour cannot be rewarded by the electorate when we come forward to these elections on May the 5th. Time is changing and we need a change in Croydon. And that's why I want to be the Mayor of Croydon. I want to bring the skills that I've learned through life, the skills as a local businessman, working with local people, employing local people, understanding what it's like to be a small medium enterprise in Croydon and working through the bureaucracy that goes with that. So as Mayor, I want to do several things. I want to fix the finances. I want to drive down on the overspends. I want to make sure that we stop borrowing money that we cannot afford to repay. I want to crack down on crime. I want to make sure that we break the exclusion pipeline that is driving our young people into the gang culture in Croydon. And we need to work with our local police to achieve that. I want to work with our housing tenants. I want to deliver the Tenants' Charter, tenants written for themselves, which talks about respect, looking after our tenants, and doing the basic things like repairing their properties. These are all things that used to happen, but they're not things that are happening anymore. And we need to restore our town centre. That's the economic hub of our borough. And at the moment, it's not delivering for us. That will bring money into the town, that will bring investment, which in turn will improve lives for all of us across the borough. These are just some of the changes that I want to bring forward as a Conservative Mayor. Croydon made me, and it's now my opportunity to give back to Croydon, make that difference. My family's here in Croydon. I want them to carry on being in Croydon and to be proud of Croydon. We've got fantastic communities here, and I've met many of you over the last few weeks and months. And together, in partnership, we can make Croydon so much better again. We can get back on the road to recovery, and we can make sure, in partnership with our communities, working from the ground up, that we put Croydon back on the map for the right reasons, because Croydon is the place to live, work, play and stay. And that's what I want for Croydon. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we have a few new people at the back. If you just help yourself to a chair. Okay, so we have two. You go and go, Peter?
Yep, happy to.
Okay.
In what order?
There you go.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Peter Underwood. I'm the Green Party candidate. First of all, apologies for being a bit late. Had trouble with buses and trains, which is a constant reminder why the Greens want to improve public transport. So sorry about that. Thank you very much for coming out this evening. Political debates are not necessarily everybody's cup of tea, but you need to get involved in it because it's decisions that are going to affect your lives. And in terms of why I'm standing for Croydon Mayor, there's three key themes to that. First one is I want to make sure the Croydon Council works for you. Second one is that I want to change the way we do politics in Croydon. And the third one is I want to make Croydon happier. I'll go through those. The first one, in terms of making Croydon Council work for you, at the moment it doesn't work for anybody. And it hasn't for years, for decades. I've lived in Croydon for 20 years, and it's not just the current administration, it's previous administrations. It just really hasn't worked. My background, I worked in the civil service for too long, about 15, 17 years. So I'm used to working in terms of public sector governance. I've got a master's in business administration. One of my tasks as mayor going in will be to review how Croydon is working from the management side and business side, because clearly that's not being done properly at the moment, so that needs to be looked at. But equally, the focus needs to be on you, in the fact that Croydon Council shouldn't be a separate thing, and that comes on to what I'm saying about changing the way we do politics. Some of you will know I campaigned against changing to a directly elected mayor, because I don't think all that power should be put in one person's hands. And so that's why I'm standing, is to put that power back into your hands, which I know Rick stole my line in that earlier. But that's genuinely, Green Party politics is believe that power should come from the bottom up. So in terms of me standing, it's not about me, I'm just there to make sure the power is put back into your hands. I worked as part of the Croydon Climate Crisis Commission, which as a starter is a really good example of where people from Croydon got to contribute into what those policies were, and then talking with experts in various fields to develop those ideas into things that Croydon could do. Unfortunately, that report has now sat on the shelf in Croydon Council for the past year, and very little has been done with it. So I'll be bringing that in when I get elected as mayor. But the final point is that making Croydon happier. And it may sound trite, but to me that should be a fundamental point of politics. Politics isn't about money, politics isn't about organisation, politics isn't about all the things you often hear about. Politics should be about making people's lives better. And the fundamental measure of whether politics is working is whether people are happier. And so for me, that should be a recurring theme that goes through everything the council does in the way the council staff work with residents, in the way that the policies are developed. And so it's making sure that actually we're focused on what people want. I'm involved in far too many campaigns against Croydon with people fighting against what the council is doing. That should never happen. The council should be working with communities and helping people to help make their lives better. And so that for me is a core theme of why I'll be standing for mayor. You'll get to ask lots of questions, and I hope you do, but yes, you'll hear from me later on. Thank you.
Our final speaker is Val Shawcross.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, everybody. My name is Val Shawcross, and I'm standing for the position of elected Mayor of Croydon because I really believe in Croydon, and because I also feel that there's a huge power in the position of elected Mayor. I came originally from up north, and pretty much when I moved to London, Croydon was the first place I settled. I've been here in Croydon now for 37 years. I first came to London to work in the aid and development sector, and I did a lot of overseas work. In particular, I worked for the Commonwealth Secretariat, helping run projects overseas in different countries around the world. I was first elected to Croydon Council in 1994, and very quickly became the leader of Croydon Council. And, you know, I look back at what we were able to do. Some of what we were able to do was cross-party, but what we were able to do in Croydon, I felt very proud of what we've done there. We had a huge nursery expansion programme. We started to tackle failing schools, and in particular, I managed in the Croydon tramlink. And when I stopped being on the council in the year 2000, to go up to City Hall, to be part and parcel of the newly created London government, I carried on living in Croydon because Croydon is somewhere I feel very at home in Croydon. Croydon feels like home to me, it is home. I spent 8 years chairing London Fire Brigade for the Mayor of London, where I introduced all the new anti-terrorism systems, and I did that around the country as well. We'd reduced fire deaths by half in London by having a huge programme of fire reduction, doing things like installing smoke alarms, etc. I then chaired the Transport Committee in the London Assembly, where we did a lot of work on scrutiny, and I ended up as the Deputy Mayor to Steve Khan in transport in particular. When I retired in 2018, he kept me on the Transport for London board, and I've been doing some part-time work since then. The last thing I did before seeking to stand in this election was I chaired the Crystal Palace Park Trust. And the reason why I came out of retirement to stand in this position is because it does actually break my heart to see that Croydon is struggling so much now. We've had a pandemic where over 1,000 people have died. We have the impact of 12 years of austerity when we've seen a huge growth of poverty in food banks in Croydon. We have huge challenges on the environment in climate change. And yes, of course, there's been huge mismanagement in the council, which I feel I have a responsibility to come and help fix and bring the experience I've had elsewhere to bear in my town, and it's my town that I care for so much. And I know that we've got huge challenges to revitalise the town centre, to tackle the growing environmental challenge of fly tipping. We've got a huge challenge that I want to take on to deal with the growth of night crime and gang culture in Croydon, and knife crime, I should say, and gang culture in Croydon. And I feel the customer services are really very poor in Croydon, and it's all about, it's not just about money. It's actually about having respect for people, for the community. It's about having respect for tenants. And I feel that so much has gone awry, but actually we can pull it round. As I always say to my colleagues, there's no point in having aspirations and great beliefs and great ideologies if you can't make it work. You've got to be able, you know, to say that the tenants of this town are getting the best service that's possible, because at the moment they're not. We've got to be able to run things and organise. So I stand before you today not just as somebody who's been involved in the Labour Party since I was 19 years of age, but actually I stand here as somebody who really cares about what goes on in my town and is really worried about the state of Croydon at the moment, and actually somebody who's got enormous management experience, and I know I can help make this council work for us as it should do. And what I'm coming to you today is to ask for an opportunity to help make this town work with you and for you as it should be doing. Thank you.
So for the next 15 minutes, we're just going to do a series of written questions, and then I'll open it up to the floor if that's okay with everyone. So a couple of the questions are similar, so I'm just going to combine them. So this is to all the candidates. This was a question from Linda and Jerry. So Linda's is, the needs of the north and the south of Croydon are often quite different. How would you prioritise meeting these needs? Would density of population play a part? What are the candidates' plans to ensure the north of the borough, i.e. Thornton Heath, gets the same level of investment that the south of the borough does? So if I can pass the mic along, and if people can kind of obviously keep their responses relatively short. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. The questioner is quite right, Linda and Jerry, I think it was, that the needs across the borough are different. One size will not fit all for a borough like Croydon. We have different needs in different parts of the borough, and we need different responses for different parts of the borough. And I think this is where our communities really come into play. We've got fantastic communities up and down Croydon, be that faith communities, voluntary sector, residents associations, and we need to work with them. I've met many of them over the last few months, and we've had some really open discussions and chats about the way things are going in Croydon. And it's coming back to working from the bottom up, working with our residents, showing respect for our residents, listening to our residents. Because at the moment, whether you're in the north of the borough or the south of the borough, you feel ignored by Croydon Council. And that's the narrative that we need to change. Everyone needs to be listened to in Croydon, and everybody needs and wants to have their voice heard. So I think that's the big change, is that we start listening to people, we start working with our communities, and many of the answers to the problems sit within our communities. You know, the panel sitting here, not all of us have all the answers to all the questions, but probably most of the people in this room do have most of the answers to most of the questions. And by working together, we can make a difference to Croydon, and we can ensure that we go on to that brighter future.
Community is at the heart of everything, and we need to work at the grassroots. The north of the borough has been badly neglected. It's had lack of funding, that's why we've had violence, violent control, crime. If you just look at the streets, they're filthy. No one's doing any garbage collection anymore. And I ask you, when we've got a company, police station, and if you look at Westminster, it's clean. But why are we not doing our job there else? It's because we've got bad leadership. And we need to make sure we put investments into both parts of the borough, but particularly in the north, because it has been neglected. The high streets have died. People cannot afford to live anymore, even in Croydon. So I have to say we need to work strongly with communities. We need to work together. We need to make sure that we're listening to communities. The council right now, if you try to call them, if you try to email them, they do not answer. And that's something that's echoed through all the residents that I speak to. So we need to make sure that we're responsive, and we have to make sure that the money is going to the community, to the elderly, to the youth. Our youth, unfortunately, have no opportunities, and that has caused the gang conflict that we're seeing in life crime. So I really want to ensure that we're investing money correctly to the right places and work with the community, amazing companies that we have. Like I can see Dexter back. He's an incredible role model, and he has actually opened up his shop. He's got a baby, he's opened it up to help bring in the youth because they've got nowhere else to go. So it's also in the South as well. There's a problem happening there that we don't talk about. So we really need to address education, putting money back into the communities. That is the key narrative. Working for the community.
Thank you. You know, this narrative about North versus South, I think that's one of the things, in a sense, that's gone wrong with Croydon. And I think that's one reason why actually having an elected mayor who's responsible to the whole of Croydon is actually a really, really good thing for us. Let's remember that these boundaries are administrative boundaries. If you're an 8-year-old in Coulston, your need to go to a public swimming pool to learn to swim is just the same as that as an 8-year-old in Thornton Heath. If you're 85, your need for access to social care is quite probably the same as your needs if you're an 85-year-old in the Northern Borough. So I kind of want to reject this idea that it's, you know, where this is the zero-sum game, it's us versus them. This is one borough, one community. Let's do the best we can for everybody. And I feel very, very much that Croydon's kind of got out of the mainstream of London in some of the ways it does things. It's not just, as has been noted, that the management of contracts is not very tight. Money is being paid and there is sloppy management of those contracts, and that needs to be tightening up. It's also that Croydon isn't doing the clever things in regeneration, which are perfectly legal and proper and effective, that other boroughs are doing. I saw that Croydon didn't bid for levelling up money when Newham did and got £40 million. I can see that Croydon hasn't recently used its planning powers to lever in really good new major regeneration. And I've seen places like Southwark build huge leisure centres and libraries using major regeneration money. I do feel that, you know, it's time that Croydon caught up with the new ways of doing things in public life, and actually that would benefit all of us, north and south in Croydon and the centre. So, you know, let's try and forget this narrative. And some of what the council can do, a lot of what the council can do, is not just about what comes in from the council tax and from the government grant. Actually, it is about working with the communities, because communities can very often get access to national government grants, major organisations and trusts, and do income generation that is not available to the local council. We can do things with businesses that lever in resources, working with the business improvement districts, and we need more of those in Croydon. Why haven't we got more of those? We ought to be promoting them. It is about actually, you know, generating the extra resource from not just working in partnership, but being innovative and willing to construct projects, regeneration projects in clever ways. And all of those things are known to us in London, but it does seem to me that London is not, that Croydon's not really been kicking its weight within London or with the government, or indeed with some of the major donors. And I hope that that is something I could help bring. Let's talk about one Croydon together. That's one of the themes of mine that you've seen on my literature because actually I care as much about what goes on in Thornton Heath as I do in Crystal Palace, where I live, as I do in Wadden, as I do in Coulston. 25% of the population moves around every year in North Croydon. So let's start thinking about all of the people rather than the administrative boundaries. Thank you.
What to do? Well, we have to look at how we got here. So I have a long memory, 49 years of Croydon. And I remember the jacking up of the car parking prices in about 1995. One of the car parking managers got an award for it one year. And then he got fired because a car park that used to be 100% full was only 60% full. Then what happened? 3,000 car parking spaces got sold off. We've got rampant property development all over and a town centre that basically looks like the Luftwaffe came back 60, 70 years later. This can only happen when you've got two dysfunctional parties, and I'm sorry to say that whoever gets to be mayor has got the challenge of whatever the candidates get elected. Now, I hope there's some great candidates, and they will be selected on merit to serve if I become mayor. That's for sure. There'll be none of this selecting someone who doesn't understand accounts, approving accounts. Or as the auditor said, some people who do not understand contracts being put on the contracts committee. None of that's going to happen. We'll be back to what used to be selecting people that are doing their best for Croydon, are the best on merit. There's many other sections as well. Both political parties have their base and they're very divided. In the north, my grandfather built terrace houses, 200 men working at a time, building comfortable, attractive family homes that all of you in the north will enjoy. In the south, they were much more laid out. In the middle, there were places like the Whitgift estate for executives who used to live in the Nestle building. 1,000 people, 1,000 high-value people in the Nestle building. And what has this council done? Both parties in 26 years, they've hounded out Nestle, 1,000 workers. And to give you a sense of scale, 1,000 Nestle workers is the equivalent of having 5,000 residents. That's an awful lot of tower blocks that have just been handed out for a development that I saw when I saw the plans for Minerva in 1993, sitting in the Alder's Mouth, looking at these floor plans, I could see would not work. And we've basically prostituted ourselves to Westfield and all the Hammersons and everything else. And in the process, sacrificed the honesty, integrity, and trustworthiness in council services. So that's what I'll bring out. And direct accountability. I think Val would be a great deputy mayor. I'll be pleased to have her as a deputy mayor. And I would be pleased to have some others that have been deselected. Because quite frankly, we should be having the best serving in office and in the cabinet.
Gavin,
not the
sorry,
rest.
can you just stick to the answer the question? Yeah.
I can't quite remember the rest of the question, but yeah, they're two different districts, and we should select the best of them.
So, yeah, okay, great, thank you.
So,
I know that obviously, if someone's already covered your point, is there any chance you could just, keep it? Yeah, thank you.
So what I'll do is I'll just say there are parts that I agree with Val in what she says, is that it's a huge shame that one part of the borough is played off against the other. But it's the result of this broken political system that we have in Croydon, where Labour don't think they can win, don't think they can win in the south, and don't think they can lose in the north. And it's the complete opposite for the Conservatives. So the reason we have this system where one part of the borough plays itself off the other is due to the broken political system that we have here. Now, where I disagree with Val is I don't think there is one size that fits all for Croydon. I think we are many Croydons, but we need to come together as a unified group of people, but understanding the differences that there are. And as I said in my opening remarks, the best way to do this is to put power into those communities. and put not just the power but also the ability to fund that into them. When developers come, they have to pay something called the community infrastructure levy in order to provide for the additional needs that those developments are going to happen. At the moment, all of that money is centralised. Where did the community infrastructure levy go to? It went to Fairfield Halls. Well, we all know what a success that was. My proposal is I would give at least 50% of that money where there are neighbourhood forums, town councils and parish councils established, so that they can decide what infrastructure is required and where it is needed. So I want to put the power back into your hands and understand that there is no one-size-fits-all solution here. We are a diverse borough, and we should celebrate that, but also understanding what those needs are for each part of the borough. I'm going to stop stealing sandwiches.
Thank you. I was going to say, others have covered the point that the history of Croydon, people believe that Labour give all the money to the north and the Tories give all the money to the south. There may be some evidence for that, but for me that's why we need to break away from that sort of politics. As Rick said, we need a new type of politics. For me, that's why it's important that you choose a mayor that doesn't come from red or blue. So that, for me, it's important. That's why it's important that you don't choose a mayor that comes from red or blue, because we need to break away from that old split system. I mean, I would equally want to say that we need to break away from this idea of what the north is like and what the south is like. During the coronavirus pandemic, I was working for a food bank down in Purley and Kenley, and believe me, there are people down in Purley and Kenley who need support and who are struggling in the same way that there are people in the north who need support and are struggling. And so we shouldn't have this idea that it's just all devoted to on regional basis. There's an old phrase in politics that some may know where it comes from each according to their means to each according to their needs. And that's the key point. It's about working with individuals and dealing with individual needs, not having a blanket one-size-fits-all, or even this is the support for that region. It needs to be focused on the needs of individuals, and that needs the council, as I said, to give power back to people, to be working with those as individuals of what they need. Final point on this, I would just say, sort of backing up what Val said, Croydon doesn't claim all of the money it could possibly get. Croydon also has a bad deal in terms of government funding. It gets given far less money than it should. Unfortunately, Croydon can't really put forward a case for more money because of how badly it's handled the money it's currently got. So one of the things we do need to sort out is we need to put Croydon's case back in order, because then we can fight for more funding, because we can show what we use properly and efficiently and effectively to help the people of Croydon.
Thank you.
Having seen some of these flights into those areas, presumably what I'm talking about, what will candidates do to change this culture in its own elections?
Okay, if the candidates can give one example.
So I've, been to all the boroughs across London, and some of the boroughs, what they actually do is, residents can call the council and say, I have some rubbish being collected, and guess what? The council shows up and has it collected. It's very simple, it works, and there's no fighting in those boroughs. So why can Croydon not do that service? Clearly, if people need to dispose of mattresses and broken down beds and all sorts of things, we can provide that service. It's very simple, it's cost effective, and it will completely stop fly tipping, and that's what we need to do.
Thank you very much for the question. I did actually see the fly tipping you mentioned as I walked up tonight. Fly tipping is a pandemic of its own across Croydon at the moment, and it's something that we do need to resolve. But it's something that is not easy to do in Croydon. It is hard to get rid of your rubbish in Croydon. We need to make it easier for people to dispose of their rubbish, because at the moment it's easy to dump it on that street corner to get a bulk of waste collection in this borough. And that's what needs to change. It's the culture of the council that needs to change, but making life easier for people to get rid of their rubbish. And I think that's where we need to start. We need to better manage the contract, and we need to make sure that hotspots, and there are lots of things that need are monitored, and that we have a zero tolerance approach for flying.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes, it is a national problem, but it is particularly bad here, and I pay credit to the work of the Thornton Heath Community Action Team, who go out regularly, and the councillors as well, to try. Firstly, I think we must be seen to be enforcing properly. The council isn't spending enough resource on enforcement, particularly because we know there are some persistent fly tippers. Very many of the road landlords, the people running homes in multiple occupation, we need to have a covert team, and I've pledged that we will have a covert team to actually catch them and start applying some penalties. I think also it is true that we need to look at doing some experiments in making it easier. It does concern me that often the strategies in Croydon don't support each other. On the one hand, there's a strategy to try and reduce car driving, car use in Croydon. On the other hand, people have to drive a long way to get rid of waste in the one disposal centre. There is just, it's not easy to take your own waste away if you want to do that. So I think there are some tests and experiments to be done in reducing prices of bulk waste collection and in reducing prices for business waste as well, because one of the best things that happened during, dare I say it, the 2020s, the sort of Tony Blair years, was there was a focus on prevention rather than cure. And it seems to me that we've been chasing our tails, spending more and more money collecting using the app, when actually we ought to be thinking hard about how we can get into this prevention and get upstream on this problem.
So I'm a long-time user of the tips because my mother had to get rid of about 3 cubic metres of waste every 2 weeks with her contractors. I'm also a repeated victim. Currently, well, in the past, we've had something like 50 car tyres dumped, and we've had to pay to get removed. At the moment, I've got 72 tonnes of fly-tipped waste on land that my family bought in the 1930s. 72 tonnes! So the solutions are to do the best things, which other boroughs do. So Viola is completely out of control. I don't see how any sort of accountability of this council is running Viola. They allowed garden waste collection, and suddenly the factory lane rubbish tip is almost empty. You could drive almost all the way around and choose which of the 10 spaces you want to pick in. I once where it was there and there was only one car because everyone was getting their waste collected from their home. But that stopped trailers getting rid of bulk waste. The other solution is in Wandsworth. You have a big skip day. So where you can see there's trouble, and Wandsworth pick it out, they have regular skips or skip days and notification through the door that there's going to be a skip where people can take large bulky waste and get rid of it. I also have no idea why Viola is allowed to get away with not allowing small trailers and not allowing residents who've hired a van or a small van to get rid of certain waste when they're having to move home. It is ridiculous. It is nonsensical, and it must change. So those are at least 2 of the things that I would change, and also bulk waste collection as well.
Okay, that's great, thank you. So if we can have solutions.
Okay, very quick ones. One has been mentioned, we pay a contractor to clean our streets. They're clearly not doing it. So we need to sort out, that's either a bad contract or it's not being managed properly. So we need to sort that out first. Secondly, we need to talk to businesses who are producing the litter and the waste that's actually being dumped to reduce the amount that's actually being produced. You all know the litter on the streets. It's quite often from fast food shops, from places like that, that's producing litter that just gets thrown away. So we need to talk to them about reducing that in the first place. We need to make it easier for people to dispose of litter, so that's better waste collection, easier, as people have said, that dumping, get rid of large objects, making that easier for people, because it saves the council money, because if it gets taken away properly, it's not then fly tipped. And then the fourth point, which is the tricky one, is actually working with the community to change the public attitude to their own streets. This is about people taking pride in their own area. My work in parks, I've worked in parks for the last few years. What people tend to do, if an area looks well looked after, people will take more care of it. They'll take their litter home, they'll put it in the bin. If an area looks like nobody cares about it, more people don't worry about dropping cans, crisp packets, things like that. So that means the council needs to put in a big effort up front to actually clean up our streets, to show that the area is looked after. Now that will take a lot more investment up front, but it will pay benefits in the longer term, because once you get people caring about their area, seeing that it's a nice place to live, people want to keep it looking like that, and people will work with the council to keep our streets clean, instead of the council having to tackle things and enforce things. You've got people working with the council already.
Okay, very, very quickly, what I'm going to say is the answer to this is to make it easier for people to do the right thing. And at the moment in Croydon, it is too difficult for people to do the right thing. If you don't own a car, you cannot go to the tip. That is the point. So we're trying to cut down on car use, but you cannot go as a pedestrian to many of the locations that we have in the borough. So that is, you know, something that we need safe access for pedestrians to be able to drop things off for people who don't own cars. Secondly, sometimes the nearest waste location is not within Croydon, it's in other boroughs. It's not just in other London boroughs, it's outside in Surrey for people in the south there. We've got to make sure that we keep and maintain cooperation between other boroughs so people can use the closest place to them, which, as I say, may not be within Croydon. And I just finally just want to echo Peter's points there, that if we start making a difference and we start doing that, people do look after their community better. At the moment, is it people within our own communities? Is it people from outside coming in thinking that Croydon is a soft touch on fly tipping? Well, I think it's probably a mixture of the both, and we need to take action to tackle both of those.
Hello? Yeah, Croydon needs investment.
Just make sure you put the...
Croydon needs investment? Okay, yeah. I'm just not off panel what they think they can do to bring investors into Croydon, because we need a bit more than the last borough that went bankrupt was Hackney 20 years ago. And that took a lot of investment, about 15 years, and about a few £1 billion to get that turned around, which is more than what the government will give us in May. So I'm asking the panel, what can they do to bring investors to Croydon? For example, Labour is going to be difficult, in my view, because their track record of going bankrupt is not a flag for an investor to like run to. Yeah.
Include one of the questions, along with the investment, what are the candidates' plans to rejuvenate our high street, potentially to attract establishments of interesting local businesses and attractive high street businesses? So it kind of feeds into that whole thing about how are you going to encourage people to invest in Croydon and in Thornton Heath specifically?
Thank you. Firstly, Labour, their model is to actually tax everyone, and that's how we get money. We need to think more intelligently. We need to bring investment into Croydon, and that is not by government handouts and grants and putting roadblocks and AMPR so we can just rape you of all your money. We need to bring investment here, and one thing that I have secured is millions ready. Number one, let's make Croydon the tech city of the whole of the UK. So that means we can bring biggest tech industries like Apple, Google, who will pour millions into our economy. Number two, a natural alliance. Look how close we are to Gatwick. Business tourism. Why don't we have a convention centre for international trade and delegations coming from all over the world? That will thrive business economy, and that will help the high street, because we're going to have traffic coming into Croydon, and we can create jobs. Once we bring investment in from various different sectors, we can then actually create job opportunities for the local people living in Croydon. So my direction is to focus on bringing up businesses, developing businesses, helping entrepreneurship, helping the startups, women in our community, and bringing foreign investment and local, especially philanthropy, into Croydon. That's where our key focus should be, not taxing people, not raising the council tax, and definitely not using AMP carries to rob you of your money.
I'm going to pass this way instead, so Rick, you go.
One of the problems with investment in Croydon is for far too long, everything has been tied to one big project that, as we all know, didn't come off, and that was the Westfield. That was the Westfield project. So my idea is not to go for putting one big egg in the basket. It's to try and attract companies and investors from all over. We have a fantastic transport system here in Croydon, and at the moment it is concentrating on taking people out of Croydon. I want to see the transport system that we've got here that links us in order to bring people into Croydon. We can use that. It's one of the best assets that we have in this borough here. And if we use that to bring people in, my mother-in-law's grew up in Wandsworth, and she told me in the 1960s, Croydon was the place to come shopping. People didn't go to West London. They came to Croydon. It was the place to go to do that. Now, I'm not one of these people who believes that the high street is dead and retail is over from COVID. But I think what we need is specialised retail and a mixture of retail, entertainment. And I actually like Farah's idea of a convention centre to be able to do that and use those transport links to do that. So instead of this being a top-down planned thing, where we pin all of our hopes on one big developer coming to save Croydon, we need to understand what local businesses, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and large enterprises need from Croydon. Now we've got the space, we've got the transport links, all we now need is just the vision to be able to bring that to Croydon. So that's what I would aim to use now.
Hey, Peter, you want to go? Just, yeah.
A few things in terms of we need to look at in terms of what the council has control over. Trying to attract big companies in. Big companies will just go where they can make a big profit. As already been said, that was the problem with Westfield. Westfield were only interested in making money, they weren't interested in Croydon. So for the council to put so much faith in a private company was just foolish. We need to think about how we get private businesses working for Croydon. Now, that's about investing in local businesses and providing opportunities for those small businesses. One of the things I've already suggested, for example, the housing maintenance contract, which is currently run by Axis, we should be taking it away from big companies and actually giving it to local businesses in Croydon. So that it's opportunities for people to get skills, to learn trades, and it's then people contributing to their own area. It's not some big multinational company that's going to take the money out of Croydon. In terms of shopping centres and things like that, big shopping centres, dead. It's not going to happen anymore. That's nothing to do with Croydon. That's just the way the world is moving. One of the things I thoroughly believe in, which I recommend people look up, is the 15-minute city model, which is the idea that wherever you live, you've got your shops, your doctors, your schools, places to work, all within 15 minutes of where you live. And it's a way of revitalising local high streets, so you get local small businesses filling those needs, and people can go shopping on Thornton Heath High Street rather than having to go into central Croydon or over to IKEA or other places. They can get what they need locally. So it's about, again, boosting that local business base. So in terms of bringing in investment, it's making Croydon unique. One of the other things we talked about with the Croydon Climate Crisis Commission is the fact that all councils are going to have to adapt to the climate emergency. It's an opportunity for Croydon to take the lead on that, because councils at the moment are dragging their feet everywhere, Croydon very badly on this as well. If we actually become the front runner on that, then we're the places where people can develop new business ideas. People can come here and show what works, and they can use that as a way to then get new business in other councils. So what we need is Croydon to become a leader rather than following everybody else. And I think that the Croydon Climate Crisis Commission report, sorry, I keep having to say those long words, That was a way we showed where Croydon could actually be right at the forefront and we can make the difference, and that's how we'd attract new companies in.
Thank you. Yes, there are 7 things that I think need to be done. First thing is that we do need to recognise and promote our own strategic assets, our location, access to Gatwick, access to London, the good schools we've got, because all the research shows those are really important things to businesses. Secondly, we need to redevelop, because we used to have one when I was leader, an inward investment programme. You start by talking to the businesses you've got, the big ones like Atkins, and say, what do we need to do to keep you? And also then you start doing an inward investment service, advertising, looking for investors and giving them a reception service that helps them find the places that they might occupy and use in Croydon. Thirdly, we've obviously got to activate the town. We've got the Year of Culture coming up in 2023. We should be using that for the local neighbourhoods as well as for the town centre. But it's about bringing footfalls, it's about bringing people into places. That is what regenerates the shops and those leisure facilities. The fourth thing is actually for everybody. If we tackle crime better and if we tackle the street clean problems and improve our just daily image, it will help regenerate the town and give small businesses more confidence to invest as well as large. We should have start-up services to help our own talent. We've got nearly 100,000 young people, a heck of a lot of talent in Croydon. Music, leisure, tech. We should have start-up services, so we're keeping our talent in Croydon and giving them a kickstart. The fifth thing is we need to, I've lost my count now, we need to actually have, we need to develop more of a university sector. We've got some foothold in that, but we've got Spurgeon's College, which is an opportunity, we've got South Bank Uni, we've got the Sussex Innovation Centre, the college itself, Croydon College, has got a centre. We need to do more to promote the university. It's one of the key things we need, intellectual capital, for bigger businesses to come in and also to keep our talented young people here. That will really, really help. And a very fundamental little thing we could do is to link the council's procurement programme to the regeneration function within Croydon, because we need not to be putting our contracts out to businesses that are in Glasgow or Northampton or originally French. We can put a lot of our business legitimately and with efficiency, financial efficiency, into local businesses to help grow and garden our own local businesses in Croydon. And I don't understand why those things haven't been done. Thank you.
I think the regeneration of Croydon Town Centre is vital for the future economy of Croydon. And I think destination shopping is not dead. We talk about the high street being dead, destination shopping is not dead. And I think there's lots to talk about Westfield, and unfortunately those opportunities have been squandered. But the reality is, Westfield and Hammerson control the largest part of our town centre. We need to work with Westfield and Hammerson to deliver that town centre. I'm meeting with them later this week. We're going to apply pressure on them to actually start delivering the town centre. The things that they promised all those years ago and has not happened. There's not been any political pressure applied to Westfield over the last few years, and we need to get that back on the drawing board. If we can get that economic hub working, it will work for the whole of Croydon. It will bring inward investment, it will bring business grade uplift, which will go straight into the council's coffers, enable us to provide better services for our residents. Working from home has changed the high street in many areas, and now the high streets are picking up. It's a different type of high street in many places, but working from home has made a difference. But if you go to Thornton Heath High Street, the rubbish blows in your face and the graffiti is everywhere to be seen. We've got to fix those broken windows that we've got on about tonight here. We've got to get the streets clean, we've got to get the graffiti removed through a graffiti removal team. Then those that want to invest their money will do so because it's an environment which they want to invest in. If I came to Thornton Heath right now, I would walk the other way. I want to come to Thornton Heath, I want to invest. We've got to make that difference, we've got to make broken windows, the investment will follow.
So, I have been on BBC News, I've been on international news, I've been on ITV. I am a person who some people say have got charisma, charm and appeal. Others, obviously not. However, you couldn't say that I wasn't noticed by anyone, whether it was at school, university, or at party conferences where I'm trying to battle with Royal Bank of Scotland. When I was battling with the chairman of Royal Bank of Scotland, a fearsome company, I did it for years, and the security guards called me the chief complainer. I was their number one problem because I kept on pointing out the things that they should be doing.
Gavin, can we
and the
focus on
solutions.
Croydon? Sorry.
So the solutions for Croydon, you allow me to be honest and direct. So basically 40% of sales will never come back to the high street. People will book online. Also people will be working home. It will not happen. Westfield will not happen. So we have to make the best we can with high tech, high trust and high touch industries. The things that do not fit through a fax machine, that do not fit through a letterbox. Now we have lots of talent, and I've already started. I'm not waiting like these candidates to do things for Croydon. I've already started a Croydon Technology Hub with a friend Leon, and I've also worked with other shops to train people in Croydon to repair things, fix things, get into technology. I'm not waiting to create things that will be of lasting value to Croydon. I've started it, and I've started already. And in terms of what would be useful in terms of the location, I already have a great location. It's an enormous location. I've spoken to Network Rail about a year, 2 years ago, and it's over the train tracks at East Croydon Station. Just pummel over them a whole lot, and you can then fit an indoor stadium and, according to a guy I met in Whitgift Shopping Centre, an indoor basketball court. So those are the solutions that I would provide, and I would encourage those types of industries and things into Croydon, into the empty buildings that have been left for property developers to pick up. So you could count on me that I would make a mark and be noticed internationally, and I'll be very happy to comment and report back and represent Croydon. But I can tell you this, it is really bad news at the moment. I don't know in any part of Croydon's operation there's anything other than the award for the worst borough council operation. And it is really tragic to have to go through inside Croydon and go back years, if not decades, to find councillors basically betraying their own constituents.
Gavin,
Anyway,
we need to move on, so thank you. Housing. Does anyone have a question about housing? Like this gentleman here, and if someone else has a question about housing, we'll join them together.
Thank you. Yeah, my next question is about housing and following on from the gentleman's point about investment. It's very interesting that we talk about investment in Thornton Heath. I'm from Thornton Heath myself, and I'm probably the youngest in this room. So I feel like it is true, but I make that point as an important point because young people are not involved in politics. And quite frankly, we cannot afford to live in our home. We talk about home. This church, this area that I'm here right now is my home. So what will you do to ensure that with investment, that it doesn't lead to gentrification and basically people who cannot afford to live in their own communities anymore? And we talk about the graffiti and the broken glasses. In a weird way, it's almost like I want that to stay. Because as soon as the area is revitalised and regenerated, and that problematic term gentrification, we can't afford to live here. And the services are no longer catered to the people and the young people who live in a particular area. So just to reiterate, my question is...
So it's about affordable housing and for young people so you can stay living in the area where you
Absolutely, so that the housing is able to go to those who still live in Croydon.
Yeah. Okay, is there someone else who has a housing question that we can provide? Lady here? Oh. So the lady here. here with a hat down this way.
Okay, so earlier on, Val mentioned road landlords in Croydon. I would say the biggest road landlord at the moment is the Labour-run council. We obviously had the scandal last year of people living in council homes in uninhabitable conditions. So what we're going to do to ensure that the homes are better maintained.
Val, first go at this really because obviously, I'll give you the first go at this because the focus was obviously on this lady's question was obviously about the Labour Council and council housing and then the affordability for young people.
Yeah. Yes, thank you very much. Actually, I was brought up in the council house, in the council estate, so it's something I feel very strongly about. I still have family members living in housing. I have visited Regina Road, and obviously I've met a lot of tenants. I've recently met the tenant reps, and I've also met Martin Wheatley to talk about what's going on. You know, the housing ring-fenced account, which councils run, i.e. the place where the rents are paid, is separate from the bankruptcy within Croydon. It's a separate pot of money. It has to be separate by law. And actually, that account isn't in trouble. And so what's been going wrong on housing in Croydon is all about poor management, poor scrutiny, poor supervision. It's very clear that Croydon does not seem to have done, in recent years, a proper stock condition survey. It hasn't gone around all its properties, looked at their age, looked at what their structures are like, looked at what's going wrong with them. It doesn't seem to me to have analysed the complaints and the repairs that are coming in to see where it is that the stock, the buildings are profoundly failing, as they are at that particular Regina Road block. So there is some very fundamental mismanagement of resource planning within the housing department. The new housing director has only just been appointed. So, you know, that was very sluggish because actually that's what it needs. It needs a shake-up in the management. It does need to have a proper tenants' voice system where the tenants are listened to. It needs to have a systematic analysis going on the whole time of what complaints there are coming in. It needs to have really tight hands around the throat management of access until it goes, and then a better company coming in order to make sure that tenants get a decent service. They're not getting one now. Appointments are difficult to get, they get broken, the service, the repairs service isn't, the repairs aren't done properly, and you know, other things are going wrong, like you know, you can be on an estate where there is a noisy tenant next door and they're not being dealt with, so antisocial behaviour isn't being dealt with properly, issues like drug dealing are not being addressed properly, and I think it's hit rock bottom, and I think the only way has got to be up now. So involving the tenants in every major decision, from appointments to issues like, appointments of staff to issues like estate regeneration planning, to make sure that there is a charter whereby basic customer service standards are set and monitored, and I think, you know, there's a need now to do a very rapid appraisal of the Regina Road building and work out whether or not everybody needs decanting into a new home. And I don't know how many, about half, I think, have gone.
I don't think it's just the Regina Road.
Yeah, I know.
That's the one that's been highlighted.
Yeah, that's the one that's been highlighted, but as I'm saying, I think if they were analysing the complaints coming in and responding to them, it would be, you know, you could quickly discover where the structural problems are and get on with them. Housing stock is ageing, but that ought to be known, ought to be planned for, and ought to be tackled now. It is about management.
Okay, you tackle the affordability just to start with, and then go on to the rest, just because obviously this gentleman's question was about affordability and being able to stay in the borough where you grew up.
And that's something that's key for all of us. As I said earlier, I'm Croydonian born and bred. I actually grew up in a council house in Hamsey Green, and that gave me a great starting point. We've ended up with a council that doesn't build council houses anymore. They used to build council houses. They stopped doing it, and they've not built any for the last 8 years. Prior to that, council houses were being built year on year in this borough, providing affordable homes for people within this borough. So that's something that can change very, very quickly, because we do have a housing revenue account. It does have money in it, and we can build council houses again, and that's what I think we need to do. Coming back to the issue about Croydon being a slum landlord, I think it's a great shame that Croydon is a slum landlord, because again, it didn't used to be that way. And rock bottom was here a year ago when Croydon was exposed as a slum landlord, and a year later, Regina Road, nothing has changed. Nothing at all has changed. We were at the cabinet meeting last night where tenants told us nothing has changed. I've committed to adopting a tenants charter that's written by tenants for tenants. I will adopt it. We need to sort out these repair issues. They are such basic issues that need to be sorted out. Again, it's back to management of contracts. The contract is simply not being managed. So I think the key thing is building council houses, managing contracts properly, and treating our tenants with some respect.
I know obviously a lot of what's been said is the same kind of thing, so if there's anything kind of different.
So, very quickly, be visible, be responsive. My own father, he called the council elderly suffering from mould in his home. 2.5 years later, he still hadn't shown up. He ended up in hospital in a severe condition and now has permanent lung damage. Why are they not being responsive? Why are they not coming? So yes, we need to make sure that the moment someone calls, the problems in their home are being fixed. That is vital. The council needs to respond. And if not, accountability. We need accountability to our council, and they need to be held accountable. Affordability. I was young once, I know what it feels like. So I want to introduce for under 25s on lower incomes, no council tax. So you have extra money in your pocket, which can go further. And also introduce something called a rent to buy scheme, where we'll put new affordable developments, and each monthly rent that you pay will build equity into buying that home back. And that's what we need to do to make sure that you put your foot on that property ladder.
So I have direct experience. I'm a licensed HMO landlord, and I'm very proud of my houses. Last night, I actually got called at 20 minutes past 11 with a burst pump when water gushing out, and I was there today. Now, this council never even went to Regina Road. They should have been hauling axes over the coals. The axis fraud has been continuing for years, and the council had one inspector for thousands of homes, and he was being told to go home early. It's just a disgrace, and it's a sign that the civil servants and the councillors are not doing their duty. Like Val would have said about the Nolan principles. It's appalling. I would have been straight down there and fixed it. But I'm after longer term solutions, not just having some builders to clean up, put some bleach around. And that's where there is education. We have a large international influx of people from hot countries who are used to high heat. They have less clothes and their metabolism is not so good. And they need educating in how to take care of a house in Croydon and how to deal with calcium, to actually do the repairs. Because once upon a time, I did have, for a moment, black mold in one of the houses. It didn't when I started off, and then a washing machine broke down, and I worked out it was through lack of ventilation. There are ways to solve it and fix it. There always are. And with me, I would make sure I would adopt one of Peter's solutions, which is basically employing local contractors, high responsibility, and also use video, and you would have to fill out much more of a form to actually put forward a complaint so that it could be addressed once, one time. And I can't believe it's being allowed to get so bad.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so when it comes to the state of the housing, I think a lot of the comments, a lot of the points have been covered there, so I'm not going to repeat those. What I would say is I think there's two things here. The first is accessibility of the council. No one can report them if they can't get hold of the people in order to do that, and I think that's been the biggest part of the scandal that no one seems to know. The second thing is the culture with the council officers and the members of the council themselves. When ITV revealed the state of Regina Road housing there, the council leader came on TV and said she had no idea that this was happening in there. And do you know what? I believe her. The question is, why? Why did the council leader and the member of the council not know the state of the housing in Regina Road? And as it transpired, it wasn't just in one location. It was all across the borough. It was endemic. So what I think needs to happen is a new, doing politics different, as Peter says, but that relationship with the officers that are responsible for that, and finding out and making sure, as mayor, I will be there to find out what is going on, not to be relied upon and say, well, I wasn't told about this. I can remember from my military career, if I'd have said that to any of my superior officers, that something that was my responsibility, I didn't know what was going on, well, guess whose fault that would have been? It would have been mine. So I'll take that responsibility as mayor. To address affordability, this is the thing that I think most people have skipped over here. I work as a financial planner. I work to help people achieve their goals and achieve their aims. And a lot of that for young people is independence. There's nothing that strikes the heart of what I consider being a liberal, which is living your own life and living your own independent life to be able to do that. As a financial planner, I set guidelines for people, and I say that you should not be spending more than 1/3 of your gross salary on accommodation and housing. So what I would do as mayor is I would set the median income of each of the areas, each community, would set the affordable housing criteria, so that in that community, housing would be genuinely affordable. And so if the median income was there, we would set it at 1/3 of there, everything there, below that is deemed to be affordable housing. That would mean that whatever people's incomes are in that local community, they would have access to genuinely affordable housing. 80% of market value for many people, and for many young people, is simply not affordable. So we should stop calling that affordable housing and use the criteria which I use as a financial planner to do that. If that's the case, then we're going to avoid gentrification because it will be based upon the people who live there. So those are my solutions to what was highlighted was that Croydon is currently running 2 parallel housing crises simultaneously, and that's quite a feat that's been achieved by this council, and that's what we need to change.
Just a short one. So there are only 2 ways to lower housing prices and make it affordable. I know. You either cause a market crash or you cause inflation and a limit on housing prices. Look, I contacted the Chancellor about it 2 years ago.
Peter.
So, to answer the young man's point, to answer the young man's point, I completely agree about the housing crisis we're in at the moment. Having been homeless myself back in the day, I was fortunate enough to be able to buy a flat 20 years ago, which I now couldn't afford, even to rent, never mind to buy. And so the housing market is broken. There is a housing crisis, there is not a housing shortage. Croydon, along with other councils, seems to have this idea that you just build more and more flats everywhere and that will somehow solve the problem. It doesn't. They are building properties for people to invest in, they're not building homes for people to live in. And that's what we need to sort out. And we need to stop building things for people to buy, because people can't afford to buy them. We need to build properties for rent. I actually think it's hypocritical of the Conservatives to talk about council housing. They introduced right to buy, which means that the council can't prevent people buying council houses, and then stopped councils investing in building council houses. So the shortage of council houses is all down to the Conservatives. is their government policy which has forced the housing market in that direction. So we need to end both of those, first of all, and that's at the national level. We then need to sort out building places to rent here under the council's control. I was at the protest last night for Regina Road. Sorry, gets quite emotional for me. I've talked to lots of people who've lived in those flats. It's disgusting the way they've been treated. And we have to put an end to that. People deserve safe, affordable housing.
So, more questions. Is there any questions about young people's safety? You know, Croydon has the largest number of young people in London, so I think it's quite a key point. So if we can maybe just collect a few questions. Now over here, there's two gentlemen over there as well.
Thank you. Well, I what we had was here last night in council. There was another venue that's been sold off, which is the Open Boxing Club. I know it's not specific to Thornton Heath, but maybe the young man over there used to go to clubs in this area, maybe they don't hear it more. But antisocial behaviour, kids falling into crime. If there's nowhere for them to go, how do we expect them to grow and nourish? Now, the Open Boxing Club, I'll go there a couple of times. I might be able to get licensed out of there, and we're going to potentially lose this again on the estate. If you walk up Central Parade, I don't know if many of you know Wellington, you may not really want to feel safe walking up at that night time. But at least if you've got clubs and initiatives where people are walking out of places by 20 and 30s, that's fine. That would deter people from hanging out outside, loitering outside, maybe getting drugs outside. What I want to know is for the young people that rely on these services, how can the council justify closing down these buildings that we have that host them without finding other locations for them to feel settled in and use these clubs? Thank you.
Thank you. We seem to spend a lot of time talking about the important issue of violent crime, but I'd like to talk about hate crime. I don't want to put this area down, but I was the victim of a hate crime quite near to here. Is there anything you can do as mayor, do you think, to tackle hate crime? And I do have to ask this in light of the fact I'm afraid now that one of the candidates in South Law has recently been in the local news for using racist language online.
Right, so the first thing you have to do is acknowledge that there is a problem before we can do anything about repairing the problem. So your statement earlier concerned me purely because it kind of brushed over the fact that there is a very different dynamic in the south than there is in the north of Croydon. So I think that's the first part that I want, just a brief explanation on to try and understand that. The second point that jumps out at me is that where we are with all of the issues that are in Croydon at the moment, I don't understand how Labour can even stand there with any kind of dignity and not accept responsibility for what's happening. All of it has been done under the Labour administration. So in the last 10 years, Labour have ruined Croydon. So I think we need to first acknowledge that. And I need you to understand, or to be able to tell us what you think that Labour has done wrong. And then I also need to understand what you're going to do about it. And then I further need to understand, just because, why haven't you done it already? Because your people are still in power.
Three questions there, just to recap. The first one is about losing vital community assets, like you adding to boxing club. The second question is about hate crime, and there was a specific mention of one of the Labour candidates. And the third question is around accepting that there is an issue, and Labour is acknowledging that they've been in charge for a number of years, and we are in this situation we're in now. And what are the solutions? So you can go first, and then Val.
Thank you very much. Just coming back to those issues, I mean, with young people with the assets that we have in the borough, we've got fantastic communities across the borough. One thing, Val did say earlier about one Croydon and one community. One Croydon, yes, I totally agree with that. One community, no. We've got a whole vast range of communities across the whole borough, each in their own way bringing wonderful attributes to the borough in particular areas, such as faith groups, voluntary groups, residents associations, boxing clubs. They all do their own thing, friends groups and parks. We're not one community, we're lots of different communities together that will make Croydon a better place. And the sale of assets is frankly criminal. Heath Lodge in Greenwood Park, the ACA at New Addington, these should be asset transfers to the community. We should be saying to the community first, what can you do with this building? Is this building useful to you? Can it help you deliver what you're doing in our communities? The council is not having that conversation. The council is simply selling it to the highest bidder, and that is not in the interest of our communities across this borough. On the hate crime, I think anyone that seeks public office needs to be tolerant and not ignorant. Everyone deserves to live the life they want to lead, and they should be able to do it without the fear of hatred coming at them. And I think the final point was probably for Val.
Probably Val, yeah.
Yeah. So I'll
Farah, do you want to let Farah just pick up on the first
So,
two?
at the heart of my manifesto is youth, because they have been neglected. And instead of spending millions on planters, I want to see those millions go to the youth. And that's where it should be going, because they are the heart of our community. One problem in particular, I work with youth across all over London, and they're bright, young, intelligent children, and they have passions, but the moment you don't have passion and purpose in life, you've taken away everything from a child. And when in school, in our primary schools, they're telling them, you cannot achieve anything. No, you can't become a doctor, you can't become a lawyer, you have no opportunities whatsoever. That's the wrong message that's going to our children. So it starts from the ground up to the schools. We need to change that messaging that we're giving to our children in schools. And we need to empower them. We need to make sure that we have boxing clubs available, sporting academies. I want our youth to be the all-stars of our community, representing our country around the world. And that's why I'm opening free amplified academies from the age of 6 to 21, which are free for North and South, all our children, that they can attend, whether it's performing arts they're interested in, singing, acting, music, dancing, whatever. Let's encourage them, let's empower them, let's bring out their confidence so they can grow to be the person that they want to be. Let's not rape them of opportunities that they're standing on those streets, ending up selling drugs because they're being grouped by gangs. This is child exploitation, and it's not acceptable, and it's happening right here, right now on our streets. And all Labour is doing is putting planters up and making more LTNs. I'm sorry.
Okay, maybe Gavin would like to talk about hate crime.
This morning at 7 o'clock, I met walking across the park on the way to her school. And her school suffers from hate crime and other crime, and kids at even age 11 coming into drugs. And sadly, the solution of the school, as is also apparent in the council, is cover up and marketing. It's not good enough. We are failing our kids by saying that if you lie and slime and just pretend that it's all right, that's the way to go in life. It does not serve the kids, it does not serve society, it does not serve the residents. For years, if not decades, as you'll have seen from the announcements from Croydon Council, they prefer to be misleading rather than authentic. And that would change if I was mayor. And getting to see the real people who are actually having to suffer in the schools. And there's another school in Woodside where the head teacher brought in for whatever reason, almost lost an entire year. The next year had only 3 students. And yet, none of that was reported, and the family were threatened, and one of the daughters was even threatened with rape. But it was not reported. And this stuff has to end, and it has to come out. We have to burst the boil and the cyst to clean up the wounds of Croydon.
First, I'll deal with the issue of assets being sold off. I've met people from the New Addington Boxing Club before. We were at a cuts demonstration and they were talking about the wonderful work they've been doing with young people there. I was also at a demonstration with Andrea not too long ago at Grangewood Park to try and stop the selling off of Heath Lodge, because that was a community asset and people there were coming up with so many great ideas about how that asset could be of benefit to the community, could get people involved, and again could be a sense to bring people together. Because, quite rightly, as pointing out, there's been such devastating cuts to youth services for at national level and at local level, and it gives young people no place to go, and it doesn't give them alternatives from the life that's being put in front of them. And so giving people those chances. But I think one of the key themes, and where I wanted to tie this in, the point about hate crime, one of the phrases I hear so often from liberation groups I work with is nothing about us without us. None of us are teenagers. None of us can tell you what a teenager in Croydon feels like, because we're not one. We have to get young people involved in the solutions. Same with hate crime. We have to get people who are suffering from racism. We need them involved to talk to us about how we deal with that. People who are homophobic attacks, anti-trans attacks, all ranges of hate crime. We need those people to be working as part of the solutions. There's no point in me standing here as a straight, white, older man trying to tell everybody else how to live their life. Stupid. So we need to get people involved in developing those solutions. That's what I'm saying about getting the community involved right from the start, not some silly fake consultation questionnaire right at the end, which doesn't actually make any difference. They actually need to get people right at the heart, making those decisions, so we get that in right from the start.
It's not the council that got the planters, it's Thornton Heath. The council sort of has we do it for community, we pay for it and we maintain it. Just to make that clear.
Okay, thanks, Barbara.
So, years ago in Croydon, there used to be a youth service. I know because my wife used to work for the Croydon Youth Service. And then we went away and I have 4 sons myself. And after taking maternity leave and came back, there was no youth service to return to. So my wife doesn't work as a youth worker anymore. And I think that is horrendous, not just for her, but for the young people of Croydon to do that. Because I saw in the work that she did as a youth worker how making small changes to people's lives at early and important stages can have a huge difference in the trajectory of those lives in the future. This is not something that costs huge amounts of money. It costs small amounts to have youth teams out in the communities, understanding where they can focus their attentions to do that. So, as Mayor, I'd like to see a real proper youth service restored back to Croydon to do that. When it comes to community assets, again, I did box at Sandhurst. I was a terrible boxer. The only thing I've got is long arms to do that. But my children do karate. They do martial arts. You can only do these if there are the infrastructure to do that. And when I see the council selling off assets for a drop in the ocean when it comes to the financial issues that this council has, it's just insane. These assets are not going to be there. There's going to be no way to get them back. And this is why I believe devolving that power down to local communities is really important. Because if local communities are organised, they have that power to be able to do that. They can create their own neighbourhood plans. Then they can mobilise quicker. And I think one of the things that is quite scandalous about the lodge thing was how quickly it was rushed through to prevent the local community from actually doing that. So not the fact that it was just sold off, the fact that it was determined to be sold off. And for what? A drop in the ocean when it comes to the financial solutions here. When it comes to hate crime, I simply can't top what Peter said. I think he hit the nail absolutely on the head to do that. But I think having an inclusive youth service is part of that, because it's making people start out on that journey in their lives in the right manner and bring it along. But once it gets to the stage of actual hate crime, there isn't a huge amount you can do as Croydon Mayor. So my answer to that is we need a little bit of prevention will help instead of having to run a huge amount of cure when it comes to that. And I think it starts with a properly funded and fully inclusive youth service here in Croydon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, one of the really sad things we've seen over the last 15 years has been the reduction of youth services as councils have been cut back, the discretionary fees they provide, not the statutory services they've got cut and cut. But actually, I think there are new models to be had in providing services for young people. We've got one down the road, the Legacy Centre, which is fantastic for those of you who've been in there, and that's partly business supported, it's got council money, and it's also got charitable support, and that's the sort of thing we need to do. We need to do a proper mapping exercise of what young people have got access to in Croydon and actually start filling those gaps. And we need to be calling in support from right across Croydon, the different sectors. I know the problems are much more intense in this area, but actually the whole of Croydon needs attention paid to its youth, but we do need to invest particularly, I think, in this area. We need to actually, because the schools are now separate, many of the schools are now, sorry. Well, look, I'm not on the council, I'm not making the decisions, but Legacy is going to get a recommissioning contract. And I've actually made that public commitment some months ago. It will be, and I've spoken with them there to speak to Legacy.
You just cut £300,000 from the budget.
Look, it's not.
Hang on a minute, hang on a minute, everyone. If Val could just, if you could just be quiet. If we could just hear the answer to the question.
I'm not being hungry. It's just hungry.
Okay, right. Well, let her answer that question then specifically. Okay.
Right. So the reason why I'm standing and why 75% of the Labour Party members voted for me is because I said I accept that there's been massive errors made in Croydon Council, and I want to come and help and fix it. And that's why I got elected to do this job. It's because I'm not turning my face away from the things that have been done badly. Actually, I want to wade in and sort this out with you all. The Legacy Centre, I've been down there, I've spoken to them. You know, I can tell you they will get a recommissioning contract if I'm the mayor of this town. And actually, they are not going to close in the interim. They do have business support. So, you know, let's not scaremonger. And I've been public about that. And it's quite difficult as somebody standing in an election to choose what you are going to commit to for the future, because you do have to get your hands on the accounts in detail, you know. But I'm telling you, that is not going to close. And I do think that we have a mission to call around the whole of Croydon for help with this. We've just had a fantastic offer of help from the Oasis School, who've set up a youth team, and Croydon, you know, has been able to respond to that. So let's not pretend that people don't want these good things to happen. We know we've got to make them happen for the next generation. You asked me about the decisions that have been made. You know, it was clear that they've run down the internal financial management systems, so they didn't know how much money was being spent. They ran a non-procedural procurement process, which was terrible. I can't imagine any other public authority doing that. And you know, there's clearly been bad investment decisions. Now, you know, I wasn't on the council there, I didn't vote for any of the budgets because I wasn't there. I know it's not Jason's fault, but I know Jason voted for the budgets. It's not his fault. You know, and I know, and the debt has gone up. The debt has been doubled. The debt had already started going up because of the way the council offices were rebuilt, a massive debt taken on there. But I think all of that is bad. It was a massive corporate failure, and Labour was in charge. And, you know, I am really sorry that was the case. This is my town. I feel a responsibility and a duty to come and try and help. And I think we should be looking for what we can do right for the future. One of the things about an elected mayor, and I voted for it, and there were split votes in my house. We cancelled each other out, but I voted for it because I've been in a mayoral system for nearly 20 years. I've been inside doing the scrutiny, and I've been inside working with the mayor, and I know how to make this work for Croydon, and I know how to have the kind of scrutiny that would cry foul and shout if there was a lack of internal financial management systems. So it's not just about what the mayor does, but it's about how the mayor kick-starts getting a proper scrutiny system going inside the council. That is about cross-party work, and it is about having a lot of those things. You know, I talk about noble principles, restoring things like openness and transparency and basic honesty to the processes of the council. We should celebrate living in a democracy. You know, for things that are going on in this world at the moment, let's be glad we live in a democracy, but let's recognise that in a human society, sometimes some people screw up really badly, and the previous administration screwed up really badly, and I want to help make it right. So, what will be different? We will get value for money from this council, because I know how to manage, and we will have high standards and principles. I think Gavin challenged me about, am I going to give jobs to my mates? Can I tell you that the council, cabinet will be interviewed for their jobs, and they'll be asked about the past as well as what their capabilities are. You know, so only people that I believe to be capable and competent will get those jobs. One of the beauties of being an elected mayor is that you answer to Croydon, Croydon votes for you. It isn't people within the council, so you know, you do not need to be cosy, not that I ever would be anyway. You know, and there's some possibility of bringing in outside advisors. I think this is the moment when Croydon's leadership actually has to get down on its knees and be humble and say to the people of Croydon, we can fix these things together. We can work on you know, supporting young people together with young people. We can work together on regenerating the economy in the town, with the business improvement districts, with the businesses. You know, we can do all these things with you, and that's what I'm trying to say to you. You've got a chance to choose a person, not a party. So, you know, what I'm saying to you is, can you look at what I want to bring to this town?
Okay,
because I'm hungry to make this town better.
I know we just want to make sure that we just get a couple more questions, and I know you didn't get. She didn't answer your question, but maybe she can afterwards.
It was about
hate crime.
Chair, point of order. This gentleman is standing as a Tory candidate in the South East.
It doesn't matter, he can still ask the question. He can still ask the question.
Okay.
I don't want
I can't understand half of being said. It's the good one.
homophobia, prejudice of all sorts. So, you know, I'm sorry.
Everybody sounds so articulate. I was going to say
Okay,
something,
but she's
nothing to do
condemned.
with
She's
anything.
condemned it. She doesn't know about that specific case, and she can't answer it. Okay, can it? It's just.
How would the candidate work cross-party if, for instance, a mayor is elected from a party that doesn't control the council?
Maybe we can just quickly get quick answers just on those quick answers? Would you work with opposition?
I've already said that I will work. I'm going to select my team from across Croydon Council. So yeah.
Okay, cross-party?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely, definitely.
Okay.
On merit.
Open to it, yes.
Open to it?
100% we need to work together, so that's why, if elected, I will make sure I meet every single candidate for every party and put a plan together that we can work effectively together.
Okay, Farah, you've already said there'll be interviews of every member of the cabinet post, so it won't necessarily just be from Labour.
Very interesting. I'm very happy to.
But not a commitment.
I think she needs to find out if Steve Reed will allow it.
Okay, right. So
Good evening, everybody. What for Val this? You're saying that you might, or you will interview people from the cabinet for jobs in the new cabinet. How do you expect us to trust and vote for you if we're going to see the same people that have brought Croydon to its knees? Personally, I think none of the old cabinet, current cabinet, should actually get a place in the new cabinet. Neither should the people that have been associated with the scrutiny, and the General Costs and Audit Committee. So I don't see how I can vote for you, Val, if you're not going to give me that clearance.
You're asking about how. Okay.
Well, not just Labour, just not any, you're saying.
Yeah. Okay. As I said, I would be asking people about their past. You know, the current cabinet is made up of the current cabinet. People like Hamida and Carlton were not in the cabinet that made the really bad decisions.
Hamida was.
But they weren't. Sorry, they weren't in the front line of it. Hamida's leaving. Loads of key people have gone. I will interview everybody, and they'll have to answer questions about the past as well as their capabilities. So I'm not going to, I'm not going to offer anybody jobs who cannot answer those questions. But I mean, I've got to get elected first.
Yeah. There were a number that were in the cabinet who are running. I just think you're obviously standing as a Labour candidate.
Yeah.
How does, as Graham is saying, how does that kind of work? That you're happy to stand alongside the people who made the bad decisions?
Yeah, the leadership is principally responsible, as well as the chief executive and the directors of the organisation, and the whole council that voted for budgets to some extent. 50% of the councillors on the Labour side will be different. There's been a real clear out of people within the Labour side by the membership. So, if I get elected, I will be interviewing people, and they will have to answer questions about what they've done in the past and what their capabilities are.
Okay, so Jason, do you want to answer? Because obviously you've been decided as having voted for the budgets.
I did vote for 2 Labour budgets that were balanced budgets, but I didn't vote for them not to be delivered, and I didn't vote for Labour to bankrupt the borough, which is what they went on to do. With regard to cross-party, I'm open to cross-party working as a cabinet, but no one that crashed the bus will be in any cabinet that I'm in charge of.
Okay, fine. Right, Mohammed?
Well, I've heard from the panelists their vision, their ideas, how they're going to improve Croydon. But my question to you is the accountability. The existing establishment lost over £1 billion. There was no whistleblower in it. All right? Secondly, now you are here for us to elect one of you. All right? The councillors are going from door to door to be elected. All right? When it comes for any concerns and issue, they do not respond, they do not answer the phone calls, all right? And the complaint system is, very bad. What kind of a policy or manifesto you are going to do it? We elect you, we elect the councillor, so we should have the right to get rid of them also.
question for Val again, really, because it's about why was there not a whistleblower within Labour?
No, I don't
What? Sorry?
I think it is for all of us.
All right, okay, but we've got to do it quickly because we're like up against the time. Okay, Peter, you go then. We'll come back to Val, but it was about whistleblowers and specifically about.
First point
You were
is...
talking specifically about Labour on the doorstep, weren't you? Yeah, so right, okay, Peter.
Quick point on accountability. I've made a commitment that the head of the scrutiny committee will not be from my party, so it has to be somebody from a different party who can do the scrutiny. I want to publish... The head of the scrutiny committee will not come from the Green Party, so it will be another party who will be there to scrutinise me as mayor to make sure there's that independent voice within the council. What I also want to do is publish charts showing the work that councillors are doing in terms of how many cases they're handling, the work that are active, because some councillors work really hard. There are some here I know who do. There are some who do nothing. Yes. And so we need to make sure that is clear and open for everybody so that everybody can see what work their councillors are doing. And I will try and do exactly the same for myself in terms of transparency so everybody is clear on what I'm doing and to make it very approachable. And I will come to meetings like this so that you can ask me directly what I'm doing and you can grill me on what I'm doing because that's what I'm standing for.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Rick.
Yeah. Just to say again, the scrutiny committee chair would not be from the Liberal Democrats. I think it's important that that is a separate policy to do that. I just find it incredible that when Val says that she is part of the solution and not part of the problem, she is the Labour candidate, but no, not that Labour, not the Labour that did all of this. I'm the other Labour that's going to make it all better. And that's just simply incredible to be able to say that. And I've mentioned before that I believe that there is a cultural problem. There is a cultural issue of how the council and the council members interact with the council officers and to do that. And to say that the culture that has generated all of these problems is also the solution. I just think everyone in this room knows that that can't possibly be the case. We need to sweep through with a clean broom to do that. So like Jason says there, I mean, there are going to be Labour and, possibly, Green and Conservative council on there, and I'm going to need to form a cabinet. And again, like what Jason says, nobody from the previous administration is getting even a look in. Not to mention, not something like, oh, they've got to answer their questions. They've got questions to answer as to what role that they played in order to do that. I mean, this is from the organisation, but there was whistleblowers within Croydon Labour, but they've all been kicked out of Croydon Labour now for blowing the whistle to do that. So you will excuse me, Val, if I find that your claims that you will rigorously interview people to be your council members as to not be the most credible answer in the world.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. Maybe we can just get Val to answer Val.
I'm really sorry, I'm having trouble hearing what was said there.
Not the only one in the council.
Just quickly, if I'm elected as mayor, I commit that I will have roadshows, so I will go around the borough for meetings like this to listen to the people. I don't want to be elected and be in an ivory tower and forget everything I came from. I want to hear from the people, understand what the issues are, and work on the issues for the people. Scrutiny lead has been spoken about by other candidates that the scrutiny lead will be from the opposition. I also admit that the scrutiny lead will be from the opposition. And in actual fact, the constitution that's been written, that's been put together by the current council, the Conservatives asked that that scrutiny lead be from the opposition, and the Labour councillors said no. So they've had it taken out of the constitution already before we even got there. And with regard to surcharges, unfortunately Tony Blair took away the surcharge. Otherwise, we could be surcharging these councillors for the money they've wasted.
We need to see transparency, and that's what's missing. We have zero transparency and there's zero accountability. So I want to be the leader that actually holds councillors accountable, because it's not acceptable the way councillors are behaving. I've heard of threatening, bullying behaviour towards residents, not on my watch. And here's a commitment to all of you. Be the most accessible mayor that you can talk to me. If any of you want my mobile number tonight, you can take it, because I'm here to answer your questions.
I didn't understand any of that.
I'm probably the most qualified in terms of analysing accounts, as I passed the investment management certificate and I've been doing corporate governance for 30 years and picking out fraud. I've also been assisting a council on the scrutiny committee by how you can pick out and sort out fraud and spot the places where it's going to be. And I can see it all over the place. The second part is where there needs to be a contract between me and you people in Croydon and the councillors. Because to turn this around is not just one mayor. It's not going to solve everything. And one part is the ease in which you can make complaints, and which Labour put in a system which didn't record the phone calls for 8 years, so they had no complaints. And that's also another problem with Access, the repairs service, running the complaints and also the repairs. So one thing that I would introduce is I'm going to be asking more time from those in the borough that are complaining to fill out the causes of the problems, the solutions, the best solution, so that we actually can put that across effectively and efficiently and save everyone a lot of time and money.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, sorry, I can't hear some of that. It's just a bit muffled, so I'll try.
But you heard what Mohammed said.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, look, it is really clear that we need to have a proper scrutiny system, that whistleblowers should be not just tolerated but supported, and that, you know, I have had 16 years of working in a scrutiny system within City Hall. I've done it when it was a Labour administration, I've done it when it was a Tory administration under Boris. The thing that worked really, really well was cross-party scrutiny. You know, I had really good close working relationships with Jenny Jones from the Greens and Caroline Pigeon from the Liberals, and actually the Tories used to call us the three witches. You know, so you can actually work together successfully. You see it in Parliament, in the select committees, so we need a lot of attention being paid to that scrutiny, and I am totally happy to support there being opposition leadership for scrutiny committees, because what matters is the quality of the scrutiny that is done, and I'm really clear that I want to commit to having the 7 standards of public life really up front and centre in what I do going forward. So, you know, what more can I say? You know, in organisations, some people sometimes mess it up really, really badly. I wouldn't dream of blaming my local Conservative colleagues for Boris Johnson's misbehaviour or for the you know, the PP contracts. Exactly, and that's my point. Well, that's my point. You know, you do have to sometimes say, you know, there was a group of people who messed it up. It doesn't mean that everybody they ever knew was implicated in it. I was retired and I want to come back because I know I can make a difference here. And one of the principal things I can make a difference with is the culture. You know, I used to like the culture that we had in Croydon Town Council in the 1990s and the early 2000s, because actually we had a sense of decency across the council where we all understood that we were working for the town. And look what came of it. You know, good things came of that. So, you know, we have to kind of stop burying hatchets in each other's heads and say, who really matters in all of this? The people in Croydon really matter, and let's work together when it makes sense to do that.
Okay, great.
Thank you for your time tonight. My question was going to be about scrutiny, because out of my own ignorance, I was really interested to know how that was going to be managed. I've got lots of concerns. I'm concerned that, I'm surprised actually, that some of you even live in the borough with some of the things that are said. But I don't want to undermine, you know, the energy that you have and the passion that you're showing to go for the code. I'm concerned about pay scales, and I'm just wondering what happened to performance-related pay. I'm aware that we've just instructed a new director of housing on 180k. That kind of money could work wonders for the Regina Road residents. And maybe once we start to see some of the improvements come into effect, we can think about spending money on these granular salaries when people haven't even shown their value and their worth yet. The whole board and organisation that's already in post, Labour, it's clear everything's crashed and come down tumbling, but these were people who were interviewed. These are people who were claiming to be qualified. So I've heard you all sort of say you've got all these various qualifications. What happens, what can I do when things, or should things, start to go wrong? How are you going to consult with the residents that are in this room? Because all of this asset disposal was done cloak and dagger. Every time I heard a gentleman here complain about communications in the council, that should be priority, because residents in Thornton Heath have been speaking for donkey's years and it's fallen on deaf ears. How can we know that you're all not deaf? That's my question. You know, okay, brilliant.
I don't know what the question was.
Will this be your full-time job? We don't want a mayor that works part-time. We need a full-time mayor to take this area on. The second thing is, when you step into the role of mayor, will you remove anybody who runs a department in the council who are incapable of doing their job? And that also includes Viola. I don't feel they perform at all.
Okay, great. So if we can just kind of get some yes and no's on some of them.
In terms of, I'll shout loudly.
Is it you're going to be your full-time job?
Yes, it's going to be my full-time job. That's the people I currently work for and are very worried about. But yes, it will be my full-time job. The pay structure, it's offensive that there's somebody on nearly £200,000 while other people are being sacked. We need to look at the pay structure in the council and get that sorted out.
Communication, are you going to be deaf?
Definitely not. I believe in being as open as possible and transparent. I want all contracts published. Once it's a public contract, it belongs to you. So therefore, you should be able to see all of those contracts, particularly things like Veolia, where that one's been kept locked away, and we need to see what's in that because it's just so dodgy.
Okay, great. Rick, is it going to be your full-time job?
In short, yes. I've just spent the last couple of weeks putting together a contingency plan for how other people will be able to run my business whilst I was basically absent from that, so I can focus on being the mayor completely. And as for accountability, absolutely. If people aren't doing their jobs correctly, then they need to be held accountable for what they are, what they're doing. So.
And on communication?
On
communication.
Communication. One of the proposals that I have is that I'd like to bring the council to local communities. I'd like to bring the services there and have hubs across, pop-up hubs across the borough, so that people can actually properly interact with the council services, as opposed to them being so distant and over phone calls that aren't answered, emails that go unreplied, and have that accountability starting from the mayor, but also down through the system.
Okay, great. Gavin,
yes,
is it going to be your full-time job?
I'll be absolutely delighted to have it as my full-time job. It will be really full-time. Definitely remove those incapable. There's far too much management, supervisors of supervisors of supervisors with not enough frontline. And as a mayor, what I would do is I would move the council meetings around the borough and have sessions to explain fully the decisions. Some things my hands will be tied, like planning, but to actually meet the people, and I'd go to every home game of Crystal Palace Football Club so that people could meet me there.
Okay, great. Jason?
Yeah, full-time job, yes. I think it's actually a full-time job plus, because it's more than a full-time job. Contracts need to be properly managed. They need to be fined when they're not doing. So yes, it needs to be managed properly. They need to be challenged and fined. Open the books communication. First thing I would do is open the books so that everybody can see what the actual mess is, because most of us are being kept in the dark currently. So we need to open the books so we all know exactly what the situation is. And I can be a little bit mutton occasionally, but I'm not deaf to what you guys are saying to me, and I am listening and I will continue to listen.
Okay, Farah.
Full-time job, day and night. I am committed to be there day and night to make sure we get Croydon back to where it needs to be. And heads will roll under my council, because if you don't want to be there day or night, if you don't want to work and represent the people, you're just showing up. I don't want you in a council. I want people there who are passionate about representing and making sure that they're helping the communities, not people who just show up and don't even answer phones or answer emails. Full accountability on that.
Great, thank you.
Yes, I'll definitely be a full-time mayor with no other interests, paid or unpaid, anywhere else, and I'll take half the salary. I want a flatter organisation, I think, because we do need to prioritise quality of frontline and frontline management. We would have something like a mayor's question time of going around the borough, so that if something was going wrong, you couldn't buffer, there wouldn't be a buffer between you and me. You could be there and tell me in front of the public what the problem is, like today, and you can judge people on their past record, and when you're in public life you can't hide, you can't hide. So I'm 63 years of age now. Look back at my record and see what I've done and see how I've done it, and see what people say about what I've done and what I can achieve. But I can tell you that the first thing I did when I was council leader in the 1990s was sack within the first 2 hours, was sack a director of social services for failing social services department, because he spent a lot of time watching cricket on the television. So, I know how to kick ass and take names, and I will do it, not from any sense of brutality, but because the people who matter are the public. Okay?